Welcome to PAMS Salon. This is the third session with the title of The Asian Music Festivals Now. Are we rising or falling? The key subject of this session is to retrospect the Asian music festival scene and the last 2 decades and the crisis we're facing since the pandemic by questioning and discussing the Asian situation in the cultural, economic, and social scope. My name is Cecilia Sujong-Lee. I'm a head of content of the MZP Stream Music Festival. And I have here 3 music festival directors in Asia who's been working in this field for a long time. Let me introduce the first person, Justin.
Hello.
Hello, Justin. Justin Sweeting is the music director of Club Cafe Flap Music Festival, Sonar Hong Kong, and Your Mom Festival. Could you please introduce yourself about what you do, who are you, what you do, and what you have been doing so far?
Sure. Hello, everyone. Thank you for inviting me here this year. I'm Justin. I'm from Hong Kong. I'm currently speaking from Canada, so apologies if I'm looking a bit blurry-eyed tonight over here. So yeah, as Cecilia said, I'm the music director of Magnetic Asia, and we do a few things. We promote festivals, including Clock and Flap and Sonar Hong Kong. We run shows year round during normal times, that is, touring headline shows. And then we also have a tech side to our business, which is focused mostly on ticketing technology. So yeah, our headquarters is in Hong Kong. We have offices in Singapore, the Philippines, the UK, and now North America. So yeah, we do what we can to try to keep momentum moving forwards wherever we can, which has obviously been very difficult through these pandemic times. But we've still been focusing a lot on the technology side of things in the absence of real life in-person events.
Thank you so much. It's great to have you here. And Adrian, hi.
Hi everyone.
Adrian Yap is a director of Urbanscape Festival from Malaysia, and I was surprised when I researched about you, and you have actually worked for a media, and you founded a media platform. And could you please explain about what you do and about your festival, please?
Okay. Hi everyone. I'm calling in from Malaysia right now. So basically, I started my career as in media. I basically started publishing magazines and websites in the early 2000s. And among the different titles that we had, one of them was pretty much a city guide to what was going on in the Klang Valley or KL at that time. And we also published this other title that was called Junk, which was basically covering the Southeast Asian music scene. So this is around the 2000 to 2010 period. As a result of us covering the scenes and what's going on, we decided to sort of develop and launch events to sort of support the publication. So not only could you read about the stuff that we were covering, but you get to actually experience it yourself firsthand. So this is like, the early days of the internet in Malaysia. So a lot of things were true publications and magazines of that sort. So that's how we basically started Urbanscapes. Urbanscapes was pretty much a reaction towards, basically putting the things that were on the pages of the magazine into a real life, real world context for people to sort of experience themselves firsthand. And that's how we started Urbanscapes. But apart from Urbanscapes, which obviously we haven't had a chance to do for the last few years, we also have the food platform called Tiffin, which we launched about 3 years ago. So those are the 2 main things that I'm pretty much focused on, in terms of the festival and also on-ground stuff that we do. Yeah.
Thank you. And next, my boss, Miso Kim, is here. She's been in the music industry for also the past 20 years. And could you please introduce yourself?
Hello everyone. My name is Miso Kim. I'm Executive Director of the MGP Stream Music Festival. In 2010, I began working on music festival in Korea. In Ulsan World Music Festival, I began my career. In 2012, in Korea, there was focus on international exchange. So there was Chandari Festa, Asia Pacific Music Meeting, and so on. There were many events to introduce Korean music on the global stage and vice versa. In the process, I worked in APAM. In 2015, there was Chandari Festa, which I worked for. I believe Justin was there at Chandari Festa. And there were many people from overseas. We received suggestion that we should sing about peace in DMZ. In 2018, that's how DMZ Peace Train Music Festival was created, and we've been working on it. With Cecilia, I've been making efforts for DMZ Peace Train Music Festival.
Thank you so much. Okay, let's move on to the first question. I wanted to cover, let's say, the past 20 years of our what's been happening in Asia and especially in the festival industry. I would like to listen to your opinion about your impression and thoughts on the music festivals in Asia for the past 20 years. I would say like Asia is a huge continent, and maybe you could explain a little more about like the special territories you've been working with. And starting from Adrian.
Okay. I think for the music industry, at least in the context of Malaysia, it's grown leaps and bounds. If you look at it from a trajectory of the last 20 years, I think it's a format that was sort of non-existent in the early 2000s when we first started Urbanscapes. The idea of having multiple acts, in over a day or two was kind of foreign. It picked up quite a bit of steam, I think, towards the I would say around 2010s onwards, teens, and then it's been really, really successful. And I think that obviously until the last 2 years, but I think it's been something that's been growing tremendously in terms of appetite for the format, and also in terms of the different genres that's been covered. It started, I think, pretty much the big focus of it was dance music related and driven, and that was something that was really, really pushing interest in that field. I think in terms of live band music, that came on board a little later, as after the dance music scene. The good thing about it in Malaysia, at least in the early periods, was that it was actually a lot of it was also government supported. If not directly, then at least in some form indirectly. There was a body that was set up that was focused in actually driving, travel experiences and offering Malaysia as a destination, for people to fly in for festivals and so on. And that was basically one of the key catalysts for the early days of festivals, in the 2010s and so on. And that's basically been the case for Malaysia. And obviously in the last 2 years, that's pretty much gone to zero. My personal thing is that in Malaysia, at least, while the early days were kind of very, very, experimental in nature in terms of different genres, different coverage and everything, in the last 5 years or so, I think it's been sort of consolidated into a few specific fields in terms of interest. And the festivals that do get the headlines, that do get the interest of the general public and so on, it has generally been very much more foreign-led, and that's also one of the reasons why it's been kind of hard to do any kind of festivals in Malaysia. Even when we open things up, without foreign travel coming in, there isn't that much of an appetite for just music festivals that's purely local driven. Yeah.
Okay, but how about you've worked with the other countries as well? Like I saw the Southeast Asian countries as very new music festivals as well. Like, what do you think about those? I mean, that expansion or the trend of the music festivals in the past, in the overall Southeast Asia.
Yeah, I think it's booming. I mean, all over Southeast Asia, it's whether it's in Singapore, whether it's in the Philippines. It's something that a lot of people are really into, and I think it's also the nature of festivals, right? It's an opportunity for you to sort of spend a day or two. So it goes beyond just music. It's part of your, I guess, in terms of the audience as a lifestyle. It's also a choice to just basically spend time with friends within that kind of setting. So sometimes it's not entirely what the lineup is, whatever. It's really, really driven by the concept and the idea of it. So definitely there's been a big boom of it. What I'm saying is just that in terms of interest, it is still very much foreign artists from outside of the region that drives a lot of the sales and stuff. And that's something I think that down the road, for it to be a scene that can continue growing, there needs to be a bit more focus on actually developing the Southeast Asian context too.
Okay, great. Thank you. And Justin, what do you think?
Yeah, I agree a lot with what Adrian said. I think overall, predominantly the period of the last 20 years has seen real exponential growth, pretty much across all markets, basically starting from zero. And the thing about Asia, as we all know, is it's not one thing, right? So different countries have been developing at different rates, and so in Korea, of course, you had such a proliferation and multitude of festivals happening. In China, there was a massive rise of festivals and a real kind of dip, and then kind of a rise again, and this kind of wave effect. In Hong Kong, we've seen festivals kind of come and go, but very few have managed to kind of stay the course over the years. But to give some sense of the kind of scale of growth, when we started our main festival, Clockenflap, it's very small, grassroots. 1,500 people attended the first event, and then it's organically grown over the years. So the scale is now more like kind of 30,000 people a day will attend the event, and that's still, relatively speaking, that's still a mid-size festival compared to many across the region. So I think pre-pandemic times, I think it was very exciting, the rate of growth and the number and diversity of types of festivals and events was only getting more interesting, I think.
Great, thank you. What do you think about, what was the thing that that the festivals have started to attract the audiences in Asia, do you think?
Well, I think because they're just really fun. Like at the heart of it, they're just super fun events, and they, speaking from Hong Kong, there wasn't a festival of the kind that we so yearn for ourselves. So all we did was just set about starting it small and seeing what happened. And it's, whilst there's so many challenges of trying to kind of pioneer a way forward first, the flip side to that is just all the advantages of being able to introduce such an amazing format to people who haven't experienced this before, and really take all the, take a lot of the benefits and credit of something that is, I think at our core, just as humans, the desire to want to connect and gather together communally and be inspired by something all together in one space in one time is really, really powerful. And so that's what festivals offer. And so once you get a taste of that, I think it's only natural to want more. So we're very focused on how we can introduce that to new people and make it as accessible as possible and try and grow that market as much as possible. But at the heart of it, it's just fun.
Okay, yeah. And what about Miso? Could you please explain a little more about the Korean situation?
Well, in Korea, it's been 20 years since Music Festival was born. It's been 20 years, and I believe it's a long history. Incheon Rock Festival has long history. I think this year it marks 16 years of its history, and Charasum Festival has 18 years of history. So those are some festivals with long history. But 2 decades alone is not long time. We've already witnessed changes of generations of music festivals. There were some dramatic changes. At first, I believe we asked, what can we do to have fun? And that was the beginning of festivals in Korea. And there were many commercial festivals. In the early 2010s, there were some large-scale festivals and headliners. And many people wanted to introduce large festivals in Korea. In 2014, we saw that domestic demand is low. Not many people actually buy tickets. So some festivals were removed from the market when we realized that market demand is low. But on the other hand, we see more smaller scale festivals. There are smaller but more unique festivals coming out in Korea. I think this is what I mean by the change of generations. So this is what we
Thank
see
you.
here in Korea.
감사합니다. So, well, so overall, I would say like there was at some point that there was a new generation or a new trend of lifestyle that enjoy a festival, music festivals, and other festivals as well. But you guys have been working a lot with the not only the Asian festivals, but also you have a lot of partners in Europe and the States as well, and you saw their festivals in the last. What do you think about the differences between the Asian festivals and the European festivals? I mean, in terms of not the as a promoter, but also like the consumer experience, and is there any difficulties in terms of a social system? Justin?
I think, well, I think it kind of touches on what I think everyone was saying in the last one as well about context. And so in Europe, festivals you can trace back to, I don't know, pagan times, let alone, the godfathers of festivals like Glastonbury and stuff. So they've had generations and generations of these events taking place. Whereas for us, it's much newer. If I speak to the majority of people in Hong Kong and tell them I work on a festival, their first reaction or thought is that I'm talking about a religious festival or the Dragon Boat Festival or something that has got a different kind of cultural attachment to what I'm talking about. So what that means is there isn't the context and experience of what a festival really is. And so what we're doing is we're starting from a very base level in terms of trying to build that up step by step, and like I was saying before, introduce people to the wonders of what a festival can be. So I think, especially at the beginning, and still to a degree, a lot of times when we're marketing the festival, it's not necessarily on the real specific differences of why our festival is different to others. It's just what is so great about a festival. So we're kind of starting from scratch kind of position on it. So I think that's one of the main differences. Yeah. Yep.
What about, so you said about like you started from the scratch, and is there any like specific things for the marketing for the Asian audiences? Do you have any like interesting stories about that in the beginning when you started a festival in Hong Kong?
Well, in the beginning, it was really, I mean, it was really almost paint by numbers style. So I remember going around with media crews and TV crews in the early days when literally the interviewers and the media were walking around telling their audience what you can do at a festival. So the whole format and concept is different to what was known then. So we had TV crews going around with reporters saying, "Hey, I'm outdoors right now, watching music. It's not weird. It's okay. It's the sun's shining. We can be outside. It's not scary. I may not have ever heard of this band before, but I'm going to give them a go." And really kind of step by step trying to handhold the audience through what this festival experience is. So that was something that initially I think we didn't quite expect what a learning curve it would be, or how long it would take to for it to really become embedded in the fabric of culture locally. And we're still not, I think awareness is still one of our major issues. And the exciting thing is that means there's a lot of room for us still to grow and expand when things come back to normal. And also just little things like the first festival I was involved with was in the early 2000s in Hong Kong. And I remember talking to one of the international bands that were over for it, and they were asking me, or they just could not believe that our perimeter fence was about the size of these kind of Harris fencing, which basically goes up to your hip. And that was the kind of perimeter fence there. And they were like, "Justin, I don't understand why people are not just walking, like stepping over the fence and coming into the festival." and I was like, wait, it's just not the culture. Like it actually wouldn't. It's just not. It's just not going to happen. People are going to go to the front. They're going to line up, and they'll pay to come in. And so, we had all these kind of this period of real, I guess, innocence and, I guess, learning together. Like now we could never have that. Now we have to have quite big fences because people will always be trying to break in any which way they can. But there was a period at the beginning where it was very pure and wonderful. It still is, just in different ways.
Okay, and Adrienne, I think I believe that you also used to some media when you started as well
Yeah.
for the festival
Yeah. I
promotion.
mean, yeah. So I think that for us, when we first started the festival, it was a local centric festival. I think we did that for about the first festival, or rather the first event we did was in 2002. And then that, so we did 10 years of that before we actually started getting international participation in terms of artists and musicians and so on. But I'll be very honest, I mean, in terms of the format and how we go about doing it and how we go about programming and dividing up areas and stuff within the festival site, I mean, it's very much very similar to what happens in Europe or in America. I mean, pretty much took that playbook and tried to recreate it here wholesale, I would say. I think that, the only main difference I think from a festival, at least from my context, and the rest of the world, is that over here, the model is that one that is very reliant on funding from either government or sponsorship and so on. So I think that's one key big difference. So you see from an experience standpoint, putting it together, and also from a consumer experience on ground, it's a lot. It's very brand heavy, and we require quite a bit of corporate support on that. So I think for many people, I've who've come to some of our festivals, will say, hey, wow, it's like almost every single thing is a branded experience of some sort. But that's just how it is for Malaysia, at least. It's really, really tough to put something there. So I think that's the key difference. But in terms of experience, in terms of how the festival runs, in terms of the programming, by and large, yes, there's a sizable local and regional content component, but I think in terms of the way that the festival is run and structured, is pretty much very similar to what happens. So it's not too different in that sense.
Okay, thank you. It was interesting that you mentioned about sponsors and funds, and because like I believe Miso has something to say about it as well, about in Korea, the differences too. Yeah.
Well, Justin talked about context, I believe, right? In Korea, I've been wondering what festival means to people. And I think people realize the meaning of festival. They know it's part of culture. It's about viewing the festival. It's about seeing the artists, but it's more than that. There's more to enjoy, and it's been pretty much recent, I believe. In the early stage of festivals in Korea, most festivals focused on specific regions, specific cities. And people like K-pop here, people like English or American pop music. And I think it's been recent, it's been only short time period that people started to enjoy non-mainstream music. So we're building this culture as well. In Korea, there are many festivals, many commercial festivals that are successful as well. And it could be similar with Malaysia. There's decentralization going on. We've been focusing on Seoul in the past, but things are expanding. People like to build their own cultural content in regions, not just in Seoul City. I said I'm working on the MGP String Music Festival, and it is also not in Seoul. We are getting support from the Gangwon province. So it is not commercial. It's more about cultural value, and it still receives support from the government.
Okay, so Before we jump to the third question, so in pre-pandemic era, do you think like the festival is going to be like the festival industry is going to grow and let's say be more connected in the Asian territory? Justin, maybe. I mean, in the future. I mean, pre-pandemic era. Did you think that the festival industry is going to grow in Asian countries and we're going to be more connected?
Yes, absolutely. I think everything was heading that way, and I think it was happening already, right? And it happens on a formal level through specific events. You know, like Misa was saying, Zandari and events like that, which really encourage that kind of mixing, especially of a lot of Asian industry people, but also just informally. And you know, for ourselves, even programming wise, more and more of the lineup was dedicated to regional Asian acts over the last few years, and that's a trend that we would only encourage to keep building on. So, yeah, absolutely. To answer your question, I think it was certainly heading that way, and it's a direction I expect it to keep heading when things return.
And then we had yes, please.
Oh no, I was just going to add to what Justin is saying. I think that that's definitely the way it's headed for a lot of festivals, and I think partly that's due to the fact that people like Justin and Talking Flat and all that, and a lot of other festivals around the region who are making a conscious effort to develop a regional support system and scene. You know, I mean, to be very honest with you, I mean, even from a context of Malaysia, you know, a lot of the promoters, you know, it might not necessarily translate into, you know, that much in ticket sales or whatever, but I think everyone has that interest in mind and to basically be able to sort of, you know, hopefully introduce new music from around the region to one another. I think that's a good thing that's been happening, and I see that continuing to.
Yeah, and then now we have a pandemic. I think one of the one of the like the hurtful stuff for us is that those funds were cut, and that was one of the reasons we couldn't keep doing the festival. Like Miso, could you please explain about the threatening situation in this pandemic era in Korea?
Well, about Korea, we are hearing from Hong Kong and Malaysia. I'm not sure about other regions, but I was listening to what you were speaking about. The Asian music festivals are growing. Many festivals have been growing. Chandari Festa and other festivals were growing and engaging in exchange. And I think it leads to visits from other countries. Many Asian festivals were garnering attention on the global stage as well. So people wanted to visit, people wanted to know how it happens. I think it goes same for the peace train. And as you know, many musicians in Asia are renowned for high quality music, if I can say that. And there are many popular bands, even from Korea. So before the pandemic, things were going well. Without the pandemic, I believe we would have been able to provide more support and have more programs, and it would have been possible to have live events. But we have the pandemic, and in the past 2 years, we couldn't hold many events and we couldn't have so much exchange. That's what happened in Korea. People are getting vaccinated now. I think the vaccination rate in Korea is higher than in other countries in Asia. Still, there are restrictions and rules from the government, and the performing arts
Could you
sector
please
is
explain more
hardest hit.
specifically? What type of restrictions we have in the concert promotion?
Right. Well, first of all, let me talk about theater, the venue. In 2020, the virus came from Wuhan, right? So the virus was in Asia. We're close to Wuhan, China, because we're in Korea. And a lot of outbreaks were found in Asia as well. So we had to close and shut down all of the venues in Korea. In May, we are supposed to have a lot of festivals in Korea, but all of those festivals in May were canceled. And I'm not sure if you've been to Itaewon in Seoul. Itaewon is famous for the subculture phenomenon. The Hongdae area and Itaewon are famous for live music scenes. And from Itaewon Club, from a club in Itaewon, there was an infection. There was actually cluster infection in Itaewon. And so many clubs in Itaewon had to be closed. They had to shut down, and that affected Hongdae area. So we've been witnessing what happened in spring and autumn of 2020. All of the live music clubs in Itaewon and Hongdae had to be closed because of the cluster infection and what happened afterward. And that led to disconnection between artists and audience. But things are better in 2021. Starting in summer, the number of confirmed cases does not affect indoor venue. For indoor venue, it's better, but many festivals have to be held outdoor and people cannot gather. Especially, we're talking about music festivals. We're expecting a lot of people, and we can't do that anymore. We can't have that synergy. Although it is really important to have that connection and synergy, so we couldn't do a lot of music festivals even in 2021. It's still considered to be highly risky to have large gathering outdoors. I don't think there have been many festivals. I think we only saw 2 to 3 music festivals or festivals in Korea in the past 1.5 years. It was almost impossible to hold a pop music festival. So I believe the music sector is hardest hit. Let me talk about the DMGP's train. We had 6 plans. We planned 6 times. We had a plan for a drive-in concert. We had a plan to have decentralized concert. So instead of having centralized venue, we thought about having multiple venues. So there could be like dividing up the number of audience. We also had a plan to, like since we cannot have a gathering, we thought about having concert consisting of more calm music because we cannot have a large gathering. We had many plans, but we also faced restrictions from the government. And as I mentioned, we are receiving the fund from the province, the Gangwon province. And they were concerned about festival. We submitted 6 plans, but those were all rejected. We still can't hold a festival. So that's what has been happening in Korea.
What about you, Justin?
In terms of
Pandemic and your festivals?
Yes, it's the same story as Misi was saying. It's just completely decimated the live industry, right? So we very early on in the pandemic decided to take a self-enforced pause on shows, and we focused our attentions in areas where either things that had been projects that had been on the back burner for a long time that we'd always wanted to do. So one of those was to create a very simple music platform. Like Adrian was talking about earlier, actually doing it in the reverse. We started with the shows and then realized it would be very useful for us to have our own kind of media channel. So we set up our own very basic kind of online radio station where we could keep promoting the music we cared about whilst we couldn't do any shows to our audience, and then focus on kind of other projects which we were able to do more on the kind of tech side of things. But throughout all of that, we were spending just so much time, like everyone was, on these hypothetical situations and scenarios, trying to plan to the nth degree all these variations and options, and trying to second guess what might be possible or might not, and ended up, it becomes, you want to keep busy because to be productive through these times, but it was also very it can be very frustrating work because all your efforts ultimately can't be realized. One of the great things about being in this live events industry is there's always a payoff. All the work is worthwhile because you get the events, you get to see everyone enjoying the time because of your effort spent. And when you don't have that piece, it becomes very unfulfilling and very, very grating. And so even just recently, we had hopes for staging Clockenflap this year as a local gathering where we would stream in some international talent onto screens. And for months, we have been working on plans and contingencies and risk mitigation strategies about how we could do this safely and securely. And we also had, we had a very scientific approach where we worked with actually the government's scientific consultants, a company called Prenetics, and did a lot of scientific modeling around what would happen if there was COVID outbreaks in Hong Kong, how that would be managed in the festival. And we even got it to a stage where we could model this. So, to put it in perspective, we haven't had a local case in Hong Kong for quite some time now, a few months. And we could model this scenario where even if we suddenly had 10,000 cases in Hong Kong, which, we haven't had, that hasn't been the reality at all. But even if we had that, we could still prove that the people, the chances of contracting COVID at Clockenflap itself, with all our measures in place, was less than 1%. And so it becomes additionally frustrating when you can turn to science and you can work out plans and all this stuff, and it's still ultimately are not able to hold the event. So we recently had to kind of cancel that and look forward to next year. And that's all anyone can do, right? Just keep going and try and survive through this until things come out the other side.
Okay, thank you. And I agree with totally the feeling that we were not able to fulfill. Yeah, Adrian, what do you think?
I echo everything that Lisa and Justin just said. It's been a very frustrating 2 years. I think that exactly what Justin said. I mean, the main challenges, obviously, it's just like everywhere else in the world, we have a blanket ban on any large-scale in-person events. But I think the one that really taking a toll on a lot of promoters and a lot of business, that whole getting our hopes up, planning for something and working towards something, and then then all of a sudden it gets the numbers start rising again, and then everything gets put on hold or gets pushed back. So we were pretty okay with managing the pandemic, at least in 2020. The numbers weren't that high, and there was that quiet optimism that towards the end of the year we will see some form of in-person event, even if it's not with foreign participation, that we will be able to hold certain things. So a lot of people working towards that deadline, working towards the end of last year and then towards the early part this year. And then everything just evaporated because we got hit by the second wave and then the third wave after that. So I think, I echo everything you said. The good, I guess, little thing that's coming out of this is that I find that people have become a lot more resourceful, right, in terms of promoters and finding different ways to, tinkering with the models and how to make, the festival business or the live event business a little bit more sustainable in the long-term run. We got all this time in our hands anyway, so we might as well figure out what works and what doesn't work and how we go about doing it when things come back. So I think that's one of the positives that we get out of this whole thing, is that people are just put in a position where they just aren't able to do shows, but at least they're able to sort of spend some time figuring things out a little bit better from a business model perspective.
Do you think we could go back to the good old days, Adrian?
Definitely. Without a doubt, I think that, Evan's dying to have to be in an audience. Regardless of what that show might be, people just want to be able to. I think it's just part of what we are as humans, right? We're very social animals, and we like spending time with people we like and we care about, and we also like to have shared experiences that come out of it. Without a doubt, that's definitely going to be something that I see a big resurgence in 2022. And I think the good thing in Malaysia, at least in our context, is that we are, well, at least the government is very, bullish on pushing and opening as much of the economy as possible. So I think that there is that feeling that, the government wants events to come in as quickly as possible. And scale from there. And tourism is one of the big things that are going to be on the agenda for next year, for the government at least. And so I think there's going to be a lot of focus on trying and supporting a lot of events and so on, from a tourism perspective and also from a economic perspective. So I think that's a good thing. And then, I think that, we're in for a good 2022, or at least from what I can see at this point in time.
But the thing is, like, we've tried a lot of stuff, miso, right? Like in Korea, there is still a lot of online concerts, drive-in concerts, but I don't see any like innovative alternative that could replace a real music festival. But we're going to keep being exposed to this kind of danger. So I feel like even though I believe strongly that like there will be a festival and we will go back to that, but still like have a little bit of fear and afraid of what will come again. And Justin, what do you think about? What's your opinion about it? I mean, what's the like? I understand we have to keep pushing. We have to keep pushing what we do, but until get there, what should we be aware of as a promoter, festival organizers?
I think firstly accepting that there is just like you said, there isn't I don't think there is a replacement for the in-person experience. I think there can and there will be necessarily innovation around things that can complement that or offer parallels to that experience. But I think where sometimes events have gone wrong, or sometimes the attempts at translating an in-person event to digital is they've tried to make it the same thing or try to replicate it, and that to me feels a bit weird in the sense that I don't think you can replicate the in-person event. So I think our own strategy has been to try and think about other things that don't necessarily look to replicate it, but look to take advantage of what the digital medium can bring. Like, for example, that I'm in Canada, Adrian's in Malaysia, you guys are in Korea. That's cool, right? And so there's things you can take from that. And for ourselves, we've been working on a project which tends to borrow or be inspired a bit more from gamified experiences and how people connect, how you can have real connections in that kind of in that kind of context. And I think you're right in that people haven't hit on what that is yet, but I think it just takes time. And in the meantime, there'll be a lot of attempts, some working, some not, to try and throw a lot of ideas at the wall and just see what sticks. But I think through all that, I think the important thing is, and this kind of goes back to what we were talking about at the beginning, is it has to be fun. So we catch ourselves all the time thinking, including at the point where we canceled Clockenflap this year, there would have been a way if we just said we will make this work. We'll go through this and follow all the restrictions to the guidelines and put on an event. But it's pointless because that event would have been redundant. It's not fun for anybody. Like, no one would enjoy that experience. And so I think as organizers, we have to keep ourselves in check and also, I don't believe it's really worth coming back with a festival until we can put on an experience that really is the kind of experience that we want to present. And at the core of that is asking ourselves all the time, is this going to be fun for people? You know, of course, it's got to be safe. It's going to be fun in a safe environment. But the vital point of that is it needs to be enjoyable. So yeah, I don't know. We're going to keep trying different things. Some will work, some won't. But I think that's all we can really do.
Great. Actually, the whole subject and the theme of the PAMS is next mobility as well. So I was always interested, like for the last 2 years, I was researching on like music festivals who's been happening in online or other format. And I was wondering, like for instance, Justin, was there any festival that made you have fun in? Is there any festival that made you have fun in the last 2 years? Any festival forms? Do you remember anything?
I remember moments, you know, and so I think this harks back to the formula not quite being there yet, right? Whether there isn't that genuine, authentic moment where you can connect in a really natural and meaningful way, as you can do in person. I think things are getting closer, but the experience isn't there yet, or the means isn't there yet. So yeah, there's been. But I don't think it's not to discount the efforts. I think we'll not get to that point where someone hits upon that thing until all these things are tried. So I do kind of applaud everyone's efforts in getting things going and keeping some kind of momentum going in the meantime. And I think there's a lot of, you know, there's also been a lot of benefits to just how easy it is to connect digitally, globally now. And I think we've seen that it's shown everyone how simple it is to work remotely and take advantage of all those things. So I can't say, you know, there's been a lot of festival experiences, digital ones that I've experienced that I've enjoyed parts of, and I think the necessity of the circumstances will mean that there will be that those will only get better.
What about Miso? Was there any interesting festival that you thought could be something in the future?
Well, live festivals are the best. Nothing can surpass that. And I found it impressive to hear from Justin. I remember live streaming festival in the past. In Korea, digital festival has become a thing quickly. We've been using video technology, and we thought about how to use technology to make festival more enjoyable. And before exploring this question, we thought about doing it on digital space. So we thought about replicating the stage in digital space. So like we also showed it through a video clip. There were many attempts in the nascent stage, and I remember Glastonbury Festival live streaming. It was really impressive because it's the largest scale in the world, and it is renowned with the longest history. I believe it was 50th year anniversary, and festival was not happening in 2021, 2020, and in 2020 and 2021, it was canceled, but then we had video. It was in film format. I believe it was 5 hours and 30 minutes long. There was Coldplay and other artists. Each team was able to revitalize locality of Glastonbury Festival, and I really liked the production. I didn't get to go to the site of Glastonbury, but I was able to imagine. I was able to see how it would have looked like. I was thinking about how the festival would have looked like with people, with audience. And it was really nice to see the festival live streaming. And the ticket sales volume was pretty high. I mean, it's not about selling tickets, but still, we can talk about solidarity. How can we invite more audience under the pandemic? Some countries in Asia talked about it, and there were projects in Asia. In Asia, we had discussions about working together for a promotion and various projects. So there was also sense
What
of
about you,
solidarity.
Adrian? Do you remember any specific festivals that could be interesting in this pandemic era that happened maybe digitally or another format?
I'm sorry, I didn't catch you. Was that directed to the thing?
Oh, so like, was
Yeah.
there any interesting festival that happened in a digital format or other alternative formats that made you thinking that it will be interesting and it could be alternative in the future?
Not at this point. I mean, to be very honest, I checked out quite a fair bit of online stuff, streaming. We did some of that ourselves, but I still feel that so what Justin said, I think it's still a work in progress at this point in time. That no one's really been able to crack that yet. But I do know that we tried in a few different cases trying to solve. When we try to do exactly what it is in an in-person experience, it never works because there's nothing replaces that in-person experience. So I think the solution and the way forward is to sort of figure out how we can actually go through things that you could never do in person or in live. I believe there was some live streaming concerts by Korean artists or K-pop artists, I think in BTS or also, that had really, really high production values that would never be able to be replicated in an in-person kind of setup. So I think that could basically be an alternative, just because it can't be achieved in person. But nothing at this point in time that I've come across to say, wow, this is mind blowing, and it totally is a whole other approach to doing things. I think right now it's just been more of we need to do something next, during the pandemic, and we need to figure out how to sort of keep things going. So it's been a lot of experimentation so far.
Thank you so much. We already have some questions here, so I'm going to deliver the questions from all of you maybe. The first question is, in the US and also in other countries, they already held a lot of offline concerts and most of the audiences didn't wear masks. Do you think we can hold an offline concert like other countries, or we should wait more about a year until people get the boost shots? Adrian, did you understand the question? Did you get?
Oh, I didn't know.
Are you vaccinated?
I got a question. Oh yeah. Well, in Malaysia, we have a very high vaccination rate. We're close to 90% of all adults are vaccinated, and fully vaccinated, and we started doing booster shots. I think this month we will be starting it for those above 60. We started doing 12 to 17-year-olds, and we're into about 70% of that right now, at least for the first dose. So yeah, I think the strategy for Malaysia is going towards pushing as quickly as possible vaccination rate and then opening things up. So I do see events happening, but I don't know about without masks and stuff like that. I think there will still be a requirement to have for guidelines and some form of social distancing and some form of mask wearing at least for the next 1 year. But I don't see that ban being in place in 2022 that strictly as it has been in the last 2 years. Yeah.
And what about you, Justin?
Yes, I do believe there is a way to safely hold events, large scale in-person events, and Hong Kong's vaccination rate isn't as high as Malaysia's at the moment. And going back to what I was saying before, like we've really worked on a very comprehensive and robust plan with this, including the scientific modeling on this, which can really show that actually, if you put the right precautions in place and make sure people adhere to them, which I think actually in Asia people will be more respectful of those restrictions, you can still have a fun event. And actually what you find is the events are actually the safest place to be in the city. They're like when all the precautions are put in place, it's safer than being on public transport, because people have been tested, or they have or they've been vaccinated, and you can control that environment. So I fully believe it's possible to have those events take place, and I wish we could do it and prove it.
Okay, great. Thank you. We have another question, but it's in Korean. I think it will be better to direct to Miso. So could you please, read the questions and answer in that?
Okay, I got a question. From next year, I expect we have a face-to-face event. If the COVID-19 pandemic persists and we have events, what would be the changes we might witness? What are you preparing for festivals in the world after the pandemic? Well, that was the question. We just heard from Adrian and Justin. I think the same goes for Korea. What will happen next year? The vaccination rates are high in Korea. But are we going to take off mask? Are we going back to the past? I don't think so. There will be transition phase. We might be able to enjoy normal lives, but we will still have a transition phase. Also, in the past 2 years, I think, so I work in festival, and I thought a lot about flexibility and being on your own. Nothing can replace live events, but still, we are living in changes. We might see more changes in the future. We have to look at digital environment. There are changes going on there. What can we keep from the old, and what can we have in the new? I think that's what I meant by saying flexibility. So we need to keep something going on, but we need to also expect changes. We've been also going through regulations and restrictions in Korea. Still, we continue building festivals. I've been thinking about my identity as a person in this industry. How can we keep our identity, our sense of identity for festival? I think that is also linked to continuing and sustaining festivals. And with that sense of identity and flexibility, we will prepare festivals next year, and we will make sure to go there, to Hong Kong and to Malaysia.
Great,
We
thank
want
you
to
so
be
much.
able to take off
And
our
we have
mask there
the
as well.
last question. Wow, interesting. With an incoming global recession and cultural funding being cut down, do you think the era of international touring and festival attendance is over for a few years? Asians are probably culturally less paranoid about crowds, so do you think Asia could lead the way to get back to normality? Maybe a future of Asian bands touring within Asia to begin with? Adrian?
Oh,
What did you say?
because I keep getting the parts of the translation, and it just gets quiet. So I don't really hear the question.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So yeah, I'll just. I think we definitely. If we can't do anything with the greater world at this point in time, I think there's already a lot of exchanges in specific countries now that you could travel to, with little travel bubbles here and there. And I think that there is talks of actually experimenting with what and working with what we can at this point in time. And if we open up a lot faster, then obviously that's gonna be a good thing. Yeah.
Thank you. And Justin?
Yes, I think. Well, I mean, the reality is that actually the West it keeps changing at different paces, right? But at the moment, the West has really opened up quicker, and at one stage it looked like Asia would recover faster. But I think the practical realities of Asia are that the different countries are responding at different rates. So what that means for touring is it's very difficult to piece together larger scale tours, because different to be able to guarantee that you can get 8 to 12, or whatever it is, however many dates in Asia in a row where all the countries will be free of various quarantine and things. I think we're quite a long way off that kind of return to normal. I do think certain places will have a return to international touring quicker than others. But I don't necessarily. I think the question was, would Asia lead the way in that recovery? I don't think so, in the sense that it's already happening in the States and in Europe, that they're actively having these shows and stuff taking place. So I think for us, it's more about how quickly can things return. And I think for a real return to normal, I think we're quite a ways off that. But I think specific countries will start, and as Australia continues to open, where you can have 8 dates or whatever there securely, to start adding on Asian dates to that will become more realistic. And then from there, as more Asian countries can lift restrictions, more will be added. But I think it'll take a bit of time.
Okay, thank you so much. It's already 2:00 in Korea time, and it's time to wrap up. And I think for the last, I'd like to listen to your little thoughts, brief thoughts about the future. Miso, what do you think? What is going to be like our festivals? Yes.
Future? Did you say future? Well, it's been difficult in the past 2 years. I think I wrapped up with the last remarks I said. We don't know what will happen in the next year. We need to also look at the rate of this outbreak. We need to find out if the pandemic will persist or not. DMZ Peace Train is different from other festivals. We haven't been able to hold the event for 2 years. And we also need to consider who provides fund for us. Things were changing, and we were able to check that we have members. The members who build this event are strongly committed. We were able to revisit our willingness and commitment to the festival in the past 2 years, because we were all trying to continue
Thank you
the
so much.
event,
And,
even though there were
Justin,
difficulties.
the last comment.
Sorry, who was that to, Cecilia?
Yeah, this is. Could you please give us the last comment about probably your future and our festival's future?
I'm when things do return, I do believe it'll come back bigger than ever. There'll be demand, pent up demand. We've Hong Kong is, I lose count. I don't know if we're on our 3rd, 4th, or 5th wave, but we've opened up several times already, and every time things open up, we see the same thing, that people are very eager to get back out there and be together and experience things. So when things return, I think it will return bigger than ever. I think because of the way the pandemic has affected everyone, including artists, everyone will want to work and be touring, and there'll be more options available. So it's just a question of when for me. But when it does happen, then I think it's going to be a really wonderful and exciting time.
Thank you. And Adrian.
Yeah, same as what Justin said. I think at least on my end, I'm a little bit more positive for next year. So I think for us, it's all about working out what our plans are going to be for next year. I echo what Miso said earlier about the transition phase. I think we will be in that transition phase for a while. So it's just, capacity numbers will have to be managed. What was a 3,000 capacity venue will probably have to be a 1,500 potentially. But I think, I think the future is going to be, from what I can see at this point in time, 2022, it's going to be pretty decent, and we hope to be able to get back to doing more shows. But I think at the same time, I'm also on a personal level looking forward to actually being able to go for shows and travel and check out festivals and stuff. And that's what I'm really hoping that will come in 2022. Yeah.
Okay, thank you so much, everyone. And we're going to wrap up in here. And thank you. And we have more showcases to come today, later, and more sessions. And I hope you enjoy everything. And see you next time. Thank you so much for coming, all. Thank you.
Everything changes.